Hi, and welcome to the second episode of STEAM Shorts. My name is Allison Morgan, and I am the Georgia Department of Education STEM Program Specialist working with 1st District, RESA Region, and schools. If this is your first episode, welcome, and thank you so much for joining me. So far, I have recorded an introduction to this professional learning journey and a first episode on instructional strategies that fit within a STEM pedagogy, and I'd love for you to check those out. In my job, I work with many schools in 1st District RESA region who are working to expand STEM and STEAM opportunities for their students. A lot of the work I do requires teachers and leaders to look at new ways, imagine new ways of looking at a standards-based learning experience. In the past 2 years, we've been implementing lots of new ideas and lots of new goals, and today I want to take some time to talk about that word new. We're in the midst of a lot of new, and in some cases that new is changing pretty frequently also. So what I want to do is explore some ways to continue the momentum that you've created around STEM and STEAM and your goals, and do that in a way that is not overwhelming, but is purposeful. So this is actually going to be a two-part episode. The first part today, we're going to talk about this idea of PBL-Lite. And in the next episode related to continuing your STEM momentum, I am going to talk about contextualizing learning. So again, my goal in this professional learning is to share tips and ideas. How can you continue the momentum around STEM and STEAM without feeling overwhelmed or adding too many things to your already crowded plate? So this idea of PBL-Lite is essentially how can you consider all the things that you would ideally do in project-based learning and just start with a few of those instead of the whole gamut. So I'm going to link an article in the notes on YouTube about PBL-Lite, and the author of the article makes several great points about her definition of what she sees as PBL-Lite. And I thought these first two that I'm going to highlight in this slide are especially important. And I think that both of these suggestions are really important no matter when you decide to incorporate PBL. And the first one is to start small. So instead of doing a year-long or semester-long PBL project, how could you consider doing a 1 or 2 week PBL, something that incorporates fewer standards rather than a longer, complex interdisciplinary project? At the DOE, we talk a lot about these long-term projects and these year-long projects, and those are good, and you definitely want to work up to those because of the opportunities that they can provide your students. But as you're just starting to roll out PBL, or in this school year, as you're thinking about PBL within the context of all the new that's surrounding us around education, keeping the project shorter might be a more manageable way to think about this initiative. Now, that doesn't mean that you're doing projects, but you're truly looking at a whole project-based learning unit in a smaller, shorter version of that learning experience. I do a lot of professional learning on project-based learning, so if that's something that you're interested in learning more about, let me know. The second highlight from the article is to only connect what fits. And if you've planned an interdisciplinary project before, you have likely looked at a standard and said, well, if I teach it like this and tweak this a little bit here, I think I can make it fit. Don't do it. Just say no to that. If it doesn't fit, don't make it part of the PBL. I'm a big believer in interdisciplinary PBL at all grade levels. I think it can create more time for you to meet the specific needs of your students, more time for personalized learning, more time to answer questions. But a very important caveat of that and of all interdisciplinary work is that you can only connect the standards that fit and that naturally work together to strengthen each other, not force-fitting concepts together. I think the whole article is a really great read, and if you are thinking about PBL in your classroom this school year in particular, I think that she has a lot of suggestions that you may want to think about. So the next part of this idea of PBL-Lite isn't in the article, but it's my spin on these ideas related to PBL-Lite. So if you're doing PBL, you have probably Googled and looked at resources before. And there are some great resources out there on the internet, and there are some not so great resources out there on the internet. So just be aware of that. Very rarely, though, even when you find a good resource to use, does it completely meet your needs as is. Those are very rare resources to find. So my suggestion here is to find online resources that meet your needs, but you tweak them, for the specifics of what you need your students to do in that time frame or what your planning needs might be. So I'm going to give you a couple examples of that, of things that I've done with resources that I found online. The first might be to repurpose a graphic organizer that you use within your PBL cycle. They may talk about, using it for a different purpose or at a different point in the project, and you may use that for a little bit different use to meet a different need for students. Also, I find that there are a lot of worksheets in with project-based learning units that I find online. And so you may take that worksheet and take a couple of the questions off the worksheet and perhaps use them for a journal prompt or some sort of critical thinking activity, or maybe as a discussion question instead of using the worksheet as is. You also may find that you find a whole PBL unit. Maybe it's a week-long project-based learning activity that the students are doing, and there are pieces of that you can pull out and use, and how you're curating your own PBL unit. So maybe it's an intro video or another, hands-on learning task that you can start to weave those activities together in with how you're creating this project-based learning experience for students. So my point here is to not be afraid to kind of piece together and revise resources as needed. I recently shared some PBL Works resources that I thought were really good. They have an online resource where you can kind of get ideas, authentic project ideas. It's a great catalyst for planning. I'm also going to link Data Nuggets, which is a great place to get online data sets to really bring some authenticity to the work students are doing with their standards. And if you do decide to use that resource, just make sure you look at the fair use policy, especially if you're going to put any of those resources online. So again, using pre-made resources can be a really good way to take some of the burden or workload off of you, but just make sure that you are revising vocabulary to make sure it's GSE aligned, that just because something says it's third grade, you don't take it as, face value of it being a third grade resource. You're really looking at it and making sure it meets the needs of your students. And you're also not missing any opportunities where if the project is written from a national lens, maybe there's a really cool way to tweak the project and add in a community partner or just a local perspective to take that project that is maybe about pollution, but then you can add in that local lens and local perspective. So I just wanted to highlight really quickly too that continuing with instructional strategies is a great way to also continue the momentum of your STEM and STEAM journey. I covered this in the first STEAM short, so go check that out. But the major point here is that if you are teaching from this teacher as facilitator, student-centered, that is a really important part of a STEM STEAM pedagogy. And I just linked a couple of more resources here. One is the Cult of Pedagogy, and then the other is Facing History. Great places to find instructional strategies that you can weave in to your work within PBL-Lite. The last thing I'll leave you with is grow your own professional learning knowledge in this. I love some low stakes PD right now. So recorded sessions or podcast when it feels accessible and not overwhelming. Obviously, these are great. If you're enjoying these, keep up with the STEAM shorts. Magnify Learning has a great podcast, and so does Cult of Pedagogy, and I'll link those here for you guys too. So define what PBL-Lite looks like for you, continue building that library of student-centered instructional strategies, and then looking for ways to learn when it feels right. I'd love some suggestions for the next episodes of STEAM Shorts. There's a form on this website, on the STEM STEAM FD RESA website. I will also link that, and I would love for you guys to fill out that form and give me any ideas of things that you want to see. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with your friends and colleagues. And if there's anything that I can do specifically for your school or district, I would love to talk about what that personalized and professional learning could look like for you guys. So feel free to reach out. There's my email address and my phone number. And I hope you guys have a great rest of the day. Thank you so much for joining.